All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our Tech Talk this Friday. Today we have Scott Katzelnick here with us talking about React projects. So thank you for being here and take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so when I first attended the academy, React actually wasn't part of the full stack developer roadmap. It was something they were thinking about, possibly beta testing, but it wasn't actually part of the official guidelines to study. So, um, pretty much, long story short, I attended the Tech Academy back in 2020, February 2020, till about the summer, late summer of 2020. And by the time I graduated, it had been about 2 months, and I was doing a job search. And React is as popular as it's ever been. And I got a notification from one of my advisors from the Tech Academy. His name was Forrest at the time, and Forrest let me know that there was an opportunity for a really cool company called Braille Skateboarding. Braille Skateboarding is they're technically a YouTube channel. They have around 6 million subscribers, and the owner of that, his name is Aaron Cairo. He was a professional skateboarder, and he's trying to build a platform to teach skateboarding and for the skateboarding community, almost like a little bit of a social media slash e-learning platform for skateboarding and skateboarders across the world. And he wanted this built from the ground up. And he had been using up to that point contracted developers, and he was ready to bring on a full-time in-house developer. And they had initially built it out using React. So the job description was for React on the front end, a little bit of Node.js for the back end, TypeScript as well, and a GraphQL layer to connect everything. Now, I had gone through the Tech Academy, so I was a subject matter expert when it came to JavaScript and native methods, but not React specifically. So to get ready for the interview, I had to do kind of like a crunch time 3 week study on React. I had seen React, I knew what React was, but I was by no means an expert. But they were looking for someone new, someone from the Tech Academy, and I went through the interview, and my interview was a little bit different. I um, I was brought on for 2 weeks, and I was brought on for 2 weeks and told if we have a feature that's being blocked by the App Store currently, and if I could unblock that, that was in essence my interview. So the feature specifically was user blocking. So whenever you have a social media app or an app with user accounts, Apple requires you to allow users to block other users. It's one of their requirements. And it was partially built, but it really wasn't working at all. And it was something that definitely required a lot of research and a lot of understanding of design principles in general. And I did a lot of research to reach out to other developers that I knew in the field. And thankfully, after about 2 weeks and 2 days, on December 27th, I was able to release a updated bundle to the App Store, and it was approved. And then by January 15th, I was given a job offer at Braille. I worked at Braille until, so that's now January 2021. I worked at Braille until August of 2022, where I had an opportunity to join Amazon. I was reached out to by an Amazon sourcer, which is a sourcer is kind of like a recruiter, but just for introductory sake. Sourcers look at people's backgrounds and resumes and LinkedIn profiles and things of that nature and connect certain headcount with that person, and was given an opportunity to interview either for something called an SDE, software development engineer, or an FEE, or front end engineer. SDE required Java knowledge. Java was also something that wasn't specifically taught at the Tech Academy at the time. We had done C Sharp. C Sharp and Java are very similar, but still it wasn't specifically taught. Or the FEE required things like JavaScript and understanding the browser and native methods. And that is something that I was much more comfortable with. So I ended up interviewing for FEE. I did an initial phone screen for 45 minutes. I did my virtual on-sites 3 weeks later. that encompassed four interviews, three technical, one behavioral. Even though they do ask behavioral in all their interviews, one was specific for behavioral. Amazon has something called LPs, their learning principles. There's 14 of them, and it's something they live and breathe by. It's not just something used for interviewing, it's something that's discussed every single day in every single meeting, whether you've been there one day or 10 years. And LPs are very much built into the interview experience, and they really like people to talk to past experiences and hitting on points that align with these LPs. So I had that, and I had not heard back for over a month. I didn't want to push. I I at the time was also interviewing for Google. This is before their hiring freeze, so this is um, late spring, early summer 2022. I got reached out actually by Amazon and Google within a 2-month period by their sourcers, and subsequently went through interviews over the course of the summer. It took about 3 months to get through all the interviews. I ended up getting the offer from Amazon, and there was talk of a looming hiring freeze at Google. So I ended up taking the offer from Amazon, and I officially started August 15th, and I've been there ever since. Um, I'm about to hit my 6-month mark on February 15th, so it's been really exciting. And it's been a whirlwind. Amazon is an amazing company. It is big and complex, and it's almost like a TARDIS, right? It's almost bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, if you can believe that or not. But it's been very eye-opening and an amazing experience. And we use React to build our products, and we use React specifically on our team. And I wanted to bring some of that knowledge and understanding specifically aimed at things that you will be able to specifically work on as a junior engineer and somebody that can try to work on and use technologies that are very hot and very in demand, and how to best show your capabilities using those. So that's the idea behind using a React project, and a little bit of my backstory. So I had a couple projects I had built at the Tech Academy. At the end of the Tech Academy, you do work on a team, you work on real projects, you work inside of a sprint schedule, right? So you are working with other members. And I did have a couple projects, but I actually didn't work on any projects until 2021, when I started to think about like how my resume looks and my LinkedIn profile, and getting that up to snuff pretty much. So I did a lot of research, and I came across a couple videos, and I'll share the link. These are YouTube videos by a gentleman named Clement Malahescu. He owns a company actually that does interview prep for pretty much any company, but any company that goes through that FANG style interview, where you have your phone screen and then your virtual on-sites, and they specifically talk about things like data structures and algorithms. I did use Algo Expert to prepare for my interviews. I thought it was very helpful as a side note. But he has a lot of really awesome videos about web development in general and being a junior engineer. And he has 2 videos specifically that are geared towards projects that you can build. And he does use React, at least in the first one, to build these projects. And I will share the links. The one that I want to discuss, though, is his project where he actually built an algorithm display app. So you can choose any algorithm, and you can manipulate a map. And in essence, this map is a grid. Let's call it 100 squares wide by maybe 50 squares tall. And you could add things like walls and bombs and different borders. And you can choose different pathing algorithms to choose from. And it will visualize how the actual algorithm is finding its way to the shortest path. And I was completely blown away, because up to that point, algorithms to me, in general, specifically pathing algorithms, but in general, algorithms seemed a little bit abstract. It's kind of like when you first learn like about APIs. When you first learn APIs, it's a little hard to grasp what is an API, right? It's like what is life, right? It's a hard question to answer, because An API can mean different things in different contexts, but algorithms, to me, what are they really for? What are they solving? What is the idea behind them? And it's something that does come with time, and you will have a better understanding as you drill down into more and more. But watching these projects that I knew were built with React, and he does show how to build these. He actually has tutorials on his channel as well, and he goes through how he actually built this project. It made such an impact on me. It allowed me to have an aha moment about pathing algorithms and in general algorithms and how they behave and what they are good for. And I thought it was really important at that point that I went and I worked on projects that I knew would have a similar impact, not just in an interview, but also on myself. Having those types of ahas and making those aha moments and making those things click in your own head adds so much inherent value to you as a developer. It really is a big difference between just reading something on Stack Overflow versus figuring something out because you may have made a mistake or you were stuck, and now you understand it because you found your way through it. And that really hit home, and I always remember that having such a big impact on me. So some of the tools that I use to work on projects, and I think I see other people use. You want to make sure you're asking other developers, right? Either coworkers if you're currently working, or other developers at the Tech Academy, on LinkedIn, at Hangouts, anywhere you might be around other developers. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Interviewers are less interested in very unique, and big, inspiring projects, and they're more interested in how you work through the problem, what you take away from these projects. That speaks leaps and bounds above if something is cool or not. Because if something is cool, but you can't really talk well to it, that's going to also show them things that you might not want them to know, or it will tell you a lot about your current level of understanding of the technologies being used. You want to make sure you're building things that add value, right? So, you want to do something called work backwards from the customer. Your customers, you use libraries and different tools and microservices all the time. So you want to build things that inherently add value to either a technology or a code base, and you want to be able to interface that with React applications, since it's such a big field right now. You want to make sure that any of the projects that you're working on, if you're going after a React developer position where they do use React, that you're interfacing with it on all levels, not just building React, but maybe building a library that React can utilize itself. The other small topic that I just want to talk about, and this is the last thing about how to pick a meaningful project, is something that is a true testament of a developer is automation, right? So there's lots of tasks you have throughout the day. You're answering Slack calls, you're checking emails, you're taking screenshots, you're going on this website, that website, you're leaving notes. There's so many opportunities for automation, even on your own system. And some of the coolest little projects that I've seen, and these aren't necessarily projects that were shown on resumes and interviews, but just projects in general that other coworkers have built that were just as impressive, are automating a lot of these tasks, right? So let's say you submit a a code review, and you want to attach a screenshot. So what do you have to do? You have to, once you have everything up and running, you take your screenshot, all right? It loads to your local machine. Then you want to upload it to a shared drive, right? And then once it's on the shared drive, you need to put it into either a markdown file, or you need to link it somehow in whatever field you might be in. Well, I took a automation task and I built it into Automator, where as soon as I take a screenshot, it takes the photo, it transfers it from a PNG to a JPEG, it crunches it down, right? So it makes the file size really small and condenses it. It uploads it to a public drive and spits back out a link in markdown format. So I take a screenshot and then I can just hit Command V to paste the link directly inside of any chat window or any description window. And that just saves me so much time, and it's something so simple, but it's so cool that this thing will end up saving me probably a couple weeks worth of work at the end of the year. And those are the types of things I'm referring to. Automation is very powerful. You can do something really small like that, and you could do really big things. And most things you're able to interface with. They either have an API that you can talk directly to it, or if you become a bash wizard and using the command line, you could really do really interesting things. So those are some cool ideas to think about when thinking about different projects that you want to build. Projects that build tech skills as well as clout. When I say clout here, I'm talking in terms of development acumen, right? Your ability to speak to terms, different models, different styles of coding, both in an interview and everyday setting with other developers. Um, so you want to make sure that you're practicing the full development lifecycle, right? So it's planning, designing, feedback, implementation, testing, integration, and maintenance. It sounds like a lot, but after you initially build up an initial, we'll call it a pipeline for continuous integration and continuous delivery, a lot of it becomes automated and extracted away from your work, and you're able to focus on the actual coding. But setting up a full development pipeline gets you ready to talk to different things that might come up in an interview. How well you're working with others, and how well you're able to release timely updates and continuously integrate and implement new fixes. You do want to follow a design pattern, right? Strictly, but fully. So there's different design patterns out there. Specifically for React, you have things like the solid principles. You also have object-oriented programming, microservices. At Amazon, we use something called headless, which is using a technology called Lambdas, which is part of AWS, where instead of having a dedicated server, you have just a headless front end that uses Lambda functions running on an EC2 instance inside AWS. It's understanding these technologies and what they give you, how they allow you to develop quicker and develop bigger. They increase your scope and bring down time to completion. So those are really cool things to think about. To highly suggest you follow and to be strict with it. When I graduated from the Tech Academy, I was told that if finding a job includes building projects and updating resumes and LinkedIn profiles, if finding a job isn't replacing a full-time job, then you're leaving work on the table, right? So, and that's very true. You know, putting out, let's say you say, all right, I put out 3 or 5 resumes or applications today, I'm good for the day. You really should treat it as a full-time job. It makes such a huge difference, and it gives you a benefit over someone who may not be doing that. And I could tell you there's a lot of people that are not doing that to its fullest extent. But if you do treat it like a job where you start every time the same day, you end every time the same day, you're doing research, you're attending meetings, whether they be externally like this or internally, maybe with friends or coworkers or other developers. It's really important to do that. And it's also where you'll come up with lots of different ideas, and you'll be able to talk about different things, whether it has to do with React or not, that you may not have even known to ask in the first place. So it's super important to treat job hunting like a full-time job in and of itself. Scope, time, and impact. So this is really big, both when choosing and building projects, and in general, how well you work as a developer. So you don't want to build something so big that it's your only project. Big projects are really cool, and it's definitely like a really cool reach. And if you can complete it, that's really great. But you do want to make sure that you expand your bounds a little bit. You want to open up and work on things that you may not have worked on before to get a better understanding of how things work together. You want to plan out your sprints, and you want to use estimates. So estimation is a really, really hard thing with software development, especially if you've had no experience before. Estimating how long something can take in the beginning is going to be kind of a shot in the dark. You're not going to really understand what your estimates are and what your capabilities are until you're actually, until you're actually recording and running these sprints and using actual estimations, even on your own time, right? In the beginning, just say, okay, I expect this to take 3 days, and then write that down. Hold yourself accountable to it, right? See how long it took. Did it only take a day and a half, or did it take 3 weeks? So this is going to help understanding different aspects and areas of your ability. And then what you could take from that is, now that you have some solid data about how you work, you could compare that to other estimations you may find online, or ask maybe other junior, mid-level, and senior engineers how long something like this normally or has taken them in the past. And that'll give you a very good idea of how to estimate better in the future. Estimations are such a big thing, and I think it's important to use these in your projects in the beginning, because you don't want to go into a new job having no idea how to estimate correctly. You want to have some of that experience behind you, and while you work on your projects, it's a great opportunity. It may be the only opportunity to practice working on estimations going into your first job. You have to remember that it's super important, and it dictates your ability to produce results. Timelines and SLAs are very common at companies, whether they're big or small. Lots of companies have these timelines and SLAs because they're working off of a business calendar, right? So quarterlies and things like that. So they need to be able to deliver certain features and results. That way they can measure their metrics and have a true understanding of how well things are working. So estimation goes full circle. It starts at the developer level and understanding your ability, and it goes all the way up to making the biggest decisions about architecture and headcount and feature feasibility and things of that nature. So it's super important to start practicing those things at the smallest level and at the level that you control, which is in your projects. Also, being able to talk about setting an estimate, setting an SLA, hitting your SLA, or if you didn't hit your SLA, what you took away from it during an interview. We'll talk leaps and bounds about your understanding about working on business projects and how important they are. So you want to also make sure that you get something out of it. So don't just code something up that you might already be comfortable with. Chances are, if you're comfortable with it, you've already built something like that, or you can talk very well to it. You can, if you're building something that maybe interfaces with React, use a new language, right? Maybe in React, use a new design pattern, but maybe use an old design pattern. Work on class components. You'll be very surprised how many components in a older code base at a company may be using older technology, right? So version 15 of React, not 18. Lots of class components. If you're not comfortable with things like prop types and default props and display name, and these are all concepts that work around class components, you're going to have a little bit of a harder time onboarding or talking to these things in interviews, where a team might be using these things in a code base. And you may have code bases like I work in, where you have both. You have older class components and newer functional components. And how are you able to make these things work together? And sometimes that's really hard, especially when you do testing, when you do unit testing. These things test very differently. So having an understanding of how to work with older technologies is just as important as understanding how to work with newer ones. If you haven't seen it before, companies usually don't like to jump on board and be the guinea pig for the newest technologies. So something new in React is going to be parallel fetching. So currently, React uses JavaScript under the hood, and everything is single-threaded. There are things that you can use to kind of make it appear to work in parallel, like TOD workers or different classes that may be able to run different runtimes. However, for the most part, JavaScript is single-threaded, which introduces things like asynchronous and synchronous design patterns, and using promises and async await and things of that nature. but some of the newer technologies that's coming out in React 18, you probably won't see in your code base for at least 2 or 3 years. And that's for a reason. Companies don't want to put the money on something that may not be tried and true and tested well in out in the environment. So work on old stuff like class components, unit testing for class components, and look up maybe some older libraries or older projects that will be using class components. And with that, maybe force yourself to use an older version of React. So using React version 16, I found to be a very good middle ground. A lot of companies are still using that version, I believe, and it's something that I think would be very beneficial. Maybe like React version 16 on a like Node 12 or something like that, right? To really challenge yourself to understand multiple levels and versions, and getting ready to talk to these types of things. And then if you really have the guts, doing an upgrade of your project from 16 to 17, or Node 12 to Node 18 or something along those lines. These are things that may come up, probably will come up as a React developer. So having experience and working directly on these in your projects have a huge impact in your ability to take in something from a backlog or understand a conversation with more experienced developers and interviewers who will be your interviewers, most likely the more experienced developers. The last big topic that I wanted to talk about specifically when it comes to React projects and interviewing and your scope as a junior developer is presenting projects in a meaningful way. You could do all the other things above really well, to the T. Have the best projects, multiple models, use older ones, took all my advice. You have this, this great this great folder sitting on your computer with cool projects. But if you're not presenting it in a meaningful way, not just presenting it, but in a meaningful way, it really won't have the impact that it deserves. So you want to make sure you're posting in online repos, GitLab, GitHub, whatever it may be. I know a lot of people don't want to put their work up there because they may feel timid, or they may feel like they're ashamed because they're a junior dev and something is silly. But I will tell you, people online, especially in the development community towards newer developers, are very nice and very helpful, and they want to share their knowledge with other people. It's really important to put these types of things online and to share that you have. You want to post them in social media. So go on your LinkedIn, go on Twitter, go on Facebook, make a small video about what you did. You want to make it known that these are things that you are posting, that you're looking for feedback. You need to be vocal, and you need to be a self-promoter. Right? No one else is going to do it. You really do need to do it yourself. So some of these things may sound rudimentary, but you'll be surprised how many people don't do these things. So I know you may have heard the saying, showing up is 50% of the battle. And that's kind of the idea with projects and being a junior dev looking for a new position. If you are showing up with your work, if you are showing up with your projects, you already are putting yourself in the top 50% of candidates, and it'll give you a huge boost and open you up to more opportunities, and they open yourself up to more luck in the future. You want to make sure that you're asking other developers for feedback. Having a mentor is a huge benefit. It's not always easy to find a mentor. Some programs offer mentors, which is an awesome thing to do. Talk to the Tech Academy, and maybe somebody who's more experienced might be offering it, or there could be a project that they recommend to go find a mentor. Whatever it is, I would suggest going through the process of finding a mentor. A mentor doesn't have to be an all-knowing senior developer from a top 5 company, right? You could have another junior developer as a mentor. Some people are stronger in other areas than other people, and you can bounce things off of each other. You'll tend to be more experimental with your code and your code bases and the work that you want to do, and you'll be able to come up with solutions a little bit easier when you're talking them out with another person, or you're showing something to another person. Sometimes showing things to someone else and teaching is the best way to really master a topic. So you want to make sure you're talking to other developers about the problems you're running into, about potential projects that you want to build, about this really weird thing that class components do and you don't know how to unit test, things like that. You want to make sure that you're being open and taking advantage of your your cohort, right? The people around you. So work always trumps project experience. It will, because the nature of working as a software developer will lead to things that projects do, and then everything else that goes along with work. But if you have a lack of work experience, then I would say what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have two really well thought, well built projects to put on your resume. And make sure that these projects are inherently different. Even if they both are React apps, I would highly suggest that you do one as a React app and then maybe one that interfaces with a React app. That will allow you to do and show two things, right? Your ability to understand React and front end knowledge, as well as your ability to understand that there's more out there than just React. And there's a lot that interfaces with React because it's so popular. I mentioned before, you want to work backwards from the customer's point of view to address main points. And as a developer, you are a customer of certain things like libraries. One of my coworkers rebuilt not the whole library, but a portion of the library called Moment, which deals with time, locales, and time zones, which is an inherently hard subject in JavaScript in software development. And he rebuilt a portion of that library to use in an actual project, which is really cool. But be specific with the technologies you use and how they add value to the customer. Make sure that is in the description of the project, not just what it is, but really what the value that it's adding is. It's super important to understand that you didn't just do something just to do it, that you did something that is going to have an impact on others around you. You may or may not be familiar with something called the STAR method. The STAR method is a model for interviewing. I personally am a big believer in it. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and results. And it's a really great way to interview. Specifically when you're talking about a project, talking about any sort of experience that you've had. One of the things that normally isn't mentioned with the STAR method is companies love data. So Amazon in particular loves data, right? But all companies love data. It's kind of the bread and butter for any business owner, any project manager, any SDM, right? So a senior development manager. If you can attach actual metrics, things like maybe downloads of a library that you built, or how much time and latency you've saved by using your updates versus the standard quo. Maybe even something as simple as the number of stars on GitHub and how many people you've impacted. That is huge. If you are giving kind of maybe like just wordy, this is the cool project, I love React, this is really nice. Look, I built a class component. It's a little bit hand wavy and it doesn't talk to the true value and the impact you made. So if you made impact to a user or a customer base, or even yourself, show what that impact was. Record those metrics, understand why they were important, and make sure that you bring them up. And the last thing I wanted to mention is you want to make sure throughout this entire process that you're documenting, whether it's through a journal or just a standard document, all the mentionable achievements and realizations that you have, because you're not going to remember 2 weeks from now the thing that you learned 2 weeks ago. And you want to have and keep kind of a record and a timeline of this. You want to be able to mold that into a nice abstract, and you can use that to talk off of as a reference. You could use it when you're building your resume. You could use it when you're writing a description on GitHub for a project. You could use it simply when you're having a discussion with another coworker or another developer because you are talking about this really obscure thing inside of React Query, let's say. Okay? So you want to make sure you're documenting all your achievements and all of your aha moments. It's super important because, like I said, you won't remember them down the line and you'll be thanking yourself later for doing them. So those are the main talking points that I wanted to bring up. Just to outline, you want to make sure that you're picking meaningful projects to work on. You want to make sure that the products are building tech skills as well as clout. And when I say clout, I'm talking about development acumen. You want to make sure you focus on three things: scope, time, and impact. Those are the three biggest things when focusing and figuring out the pros and cons list of working on a project. Scope, time, and impact are really a simplified view, kind of deduced all the way down to the lowest common denominator. You will find scope, time, and impact are the three points that will give you the best result, your best return on your investment for time. And then last but not least, presenting projects in a meaningful way. Make sure all that hard work that you put into choosing the right projects, building, going to hangouts, going to meetings, is being presented and that people hear it. It's super important, and it brings everything together in the end. So those are my tips and tricks about things that I did, things that I wish I had done, and how specifically to focus on finding the right projects. I decided not to be specific about any projects. I will give the links, which are a specific project that I think is really cool and could feed ideas off of, and I'll put them in here right at the end before I leave. But I didn't want to give a specific project because I noticed a tendency, and I did it too when I was a junior dev, is if somebody gives a specific, then that's just what you're going to use. And for the most part, maybe you won't, but for the most part, a lot of people just will, right? And I don't think that's inherently wise, right? I don't think doing that will benefit you. In fact, if anything, it'll hurt you, right? Because it'll take time away from thinking about this problem, working through this problem that you have, right? Finding a project that is meaningful, impactful, that is measurable, that I can control the scope, the time, and I can make an impact on, and that I will. Going through that project will inherently help you as a developer when you become one, and make the project you're working on more meaningful in general. And those are the reasons why I didn't have any specific project that I wanted to point out. To do a couple of examples here and there, but I was pretty generalized about them. So if anyone does have any specific questions, you could definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you have any any feedback in any projects that you may be thinking about, general ideas, I'm more than open to responding on LinkedIn. I promise I won't ghost anyone. As long as we're able to have a conversation through the messaging, no problem. Always make time for Tech Academy alums. So that's what I had today. I wanted to leave about 15 minutes or so for any Q&A.
Yeah, thank
And I
you so
appreciate
much,
the time.
Scott. That was very helpful. We actually have some great questions in the chat already. Let's see. Let me scroll back up a little bit. So if I missed any of your questions, please let me know. But let's see. It says, what do you mean by interfacing with React on all levels?
Sure. So React is a big and complex framework. There's lots of different ways to interface with React. When I say interface, I'm referring to anything besides working on a screen right within an IDE on actual components or styles. Anything besides the actual code base or specifically the React part of the code base. So you have things like testing libraries like Jest, Enzyme, React DOM, and things of that nature. You have things like TypeScript, which you can build React apps with. TypeScript interfaces with React. You can build a type-safe React, and I do suggest using TypeScript over JavaScript. You get all the benefit of JavaScript with while either learning or utilizing a type-safe language. It's going to be statically built. It's going to give you compile errors before you build it, and it's going to do all the things that TypeScript does so wonderfully. But that interfaces with React. And then there's, if you go on the NPM registry, there's countless libraries that are built to interface with React for all different reasons. Some of them very large, some of them really small. One that I find really helpful when I was working as a developer on my own was sometimes third-party libraries aren't always updated. So if you either update React or there's an update in React or something's broken because of a line in maybe a third-party library, it's an anti-pattern to go into a node module and actually work on a library itself, change the code, and then use that inside of your project. every time your project is built, technically you don't store the node modules folder. You store something called a package.json and a package lock file, which is used to rebuild your node modules. So any code changes that you may have made in node modules won't be kept. And you don't want to commit your node modules library because that's something that can take up lots of space and kind of make your project clunky. So there's a library called post install, and what post install will allow you to do is go into a third-party node module and make an actual code change, use a little script. It'll save the change you made into a folder within your React library that gets submitted to your repo. And then anytime the package lock runs and installs that library, it applies that fix to it. So that's a really cool example of a smaller library that is very helpful for development purposes and kind of a quick fix before maybe something larger or going an alternate route might be. So those are just a few examples of what I mean by interface with React and different areas you can look at when you're thinking about building projects. It doesn't have to be specifically a React project. You can build a lot of these libraries using TypeScript and JavaScript as well that interface with a React project. One of the biggest ones is React Router, right? That's a very big, complex project. But this is something that was built with TypeScript. So that's an example of what I was referring to.
Got it. Thank you. And then earlier you were talking about the hiring freezes that you were hearing about, and Jacob is wondering if there is where you heard that, if there is a group like on LinkedIn or Reddit or something through colleagues.
Back in so at the time that I was in contact with Google and Amazon, this was maybe mid-May, early to mid-May of 2022. And there was no word yet of a hiring freeze. So I had gone through both of my phone screens. I had gone through my on-site interviews. And by maybe end of July, early August, there was talk about possible hiring freezes at Google. And I think the Google one hit early August, first week of August. Someone can keep me honest here, but right around then. And I was at that point, I was at the team matching phase. So I passed hiring committee. I was at team matching. I hadn't officially had an offer. Google doesn't give you an offer until a development manager decides to put you on their team. And if you didn't have an offer, if there was a hiring freeze, you would pretty much have to do everything over in 2023 or 2024, whenever their hiring freeze would have ended. And I did have sitting in my email an Amazon offer. So I went with the sure bet and I took the Amazon offer. I would have been proud to work at either of those companies. I wasn't actually aiming to work at either of those companies. At the time I was working with Braille, I knew I wanted to expand and I wanted to work at a larger company on larger teams. So I was just starting my journey. It just so happened that I was reached out to by sourcers from both Google and Amazon. And I think a lot of that has to do with my LinkedIn. I took a lot of really great advice from Forrest and from the Tech Academy in general about building your LinkedIn and utilizing all of the tools. I pay for LinkedIn Premium, which is like $30 a month, but I paid for it the entire time that I was unemployed and the entire time that I was going through school and building. I thought the return on investment was well worth it. It allowed me to talk directly to recruiters with something called InMail, which is kind of like this direct to recruiter messaging service. It also gives you a lot of really cool insight about where you rank against other applicants. So I utilized that and I really beefed up my LinkedIn profile, which I think gave me a lot more exposure. And what I did in order to build kind of my my exposure online through LinkedIn is I used a metric called page visits. So I don't know if this is offered without the premium, but I had access to how many people were viewing my page each week and what companies they worked at and what their positions were. This is all gathered data and it's anonymous about the person themselves. It just gives you this generalized data. And I use that as a metric to know how well my LinkedIn profile was doing, whether I was doing well or not. So the specific hiring freeze that I heard was directly from my recruiter at Google. They were about to go into a hiring freeze. They were just given an internal email to allow to tell people that were going through the interview process at the time. The hiring freeze didn't occur at Amazon until maybe November or December.
Got it. And then Jade joined us a little bit later, and they're wondering why you specifically chose to work with React. That's something they're struggling with. They're trying to figure out which direction to go in regarding the language and which one to focus on. So they were wondering if your choice was based on preference, opportunity, finances, etc.
Sure. Well, I actually didn't love React the first time I saw it. I was very confused by it, and I'm talking about like the first time I saw it. It seemed cumbersome, a little bit clunky. Native JavaScript seemed much more straightforward. Right? You just link a CSS file and a JavaScript file, and there goes your HTML page. Like, why do you need all of these brackets, and why do things have to be nested? And it just seemed weird to me. So I didn't have actually a preference for React. And at the time, I was learning. I think back then we were learning C#, right? So we were learning. It wasn't .NET Core yet. It was still framework. So we were learning a lot of old framework stuff, and I was kind of enveloped inside of the C# world. I wasn't specifically aiming towards React, but I knew that I most likely was going to work towards front-end development rather than back-end development. And the most widely used language for front-end development is JavaScript, and you can input TypeScript into that as well. And the largest framework for JavaScript/TypeScript is React. And it's not a coincidence, right? It's the most in demand. It gave me the most opportunities. I knew that. So for the first couple of weeks, I kind of went against the grain, and I learned React. Once I learned React, now I actually love it. That I have a really a good understanding of what it's actually doing under the hood and how it actually abstracts away so much of the complicated things you'd have to do using native methods. It really is a miracle it works to begin with. So that is why I focus towards React. I followed the path of least resistance. I didn't want to be too picky, and I wanted to give myself the best opportunity for job possibilities and job interviews.
Got it. I have a question. So, out of curiosity, I actually haven't worked with React, and I was wondering if someone who doesn't know JavaScript could learn React first and then move towards JavaScript, or you will have to know JavaScript in order to learn React.
I wouldn't suggest it. So JavaScript, React. If you don't know JavaScript, you won't really be able to understand what's going on. So React itself is something called a UI library, and a lot of people forget that. What a lot of people will do is they'll build a standard React component. Let's say, just call it form, right? I want to build a form, so I'm going to build a component called form, and that component is going to live on my page. And what this component does is it gets all the really cool things that React does, right? So hot reloading as I'm developing, and a Webpack or Babel and bundling, right? So it's a really small file size, and minification and obfuscation of your code, and use something really cool like styled components to style your components, which is a really cool way to do styling. But a lot of people will add actual business logic into that component, right? That's not initially what React was supposed to do. React is supposed to focus on the UI, and any sort of business logic is supposed to either live on a server or kind of like the data layer, right? So most of the business logic you have is kind of modeling and massaging the data and getting that into a form that the client, the browser understands. And a lot of people just end up building that directly into their components. There's a very popular library called Redux that a lot of people use. And Redux, while it's made for React applications, dispatching maybe and building your dispatches directly in a component maybe isn't the best, right? If you understand how Redux and what it does, uh, in essence, it's state management. So figure state is currently the value of something. So currently the state of the input field is email address at email.com. You need to store that somewhere somehow. And I'm not talking about somebody's email in a database. I mean, store the state that actually is showing up on the screen. So you could build a cache and you could build like a local, your own local data store, but Redux already does that. And there's a lot of other state libraries, right? So if you don't understand a lot of these concepts and why some are good and some are bad, and how to implement things through JavaScript, you really aren't going to understand React at all. It there actually isn't a lot of React in React, React code bases. It mostly is JavaScript, and there's just a couple things within the component that makes it React. One of them is called JSX, which is JavaScript in it's pretty much JavaScript in HTML. So you can't write JavaScript inside of an index.html file. React allows you to write and use JavaScript to directly affect the different types of tags that will render on a page. So, but the way that you control that is via different methods and ideas that JavaScript inherently uses. So I would highly suggest you have a good foundational understanding of JavaScript. You don't need to go crazy, but I would say maybe a couple weeks worth of understanding the basics of JavaScript, and then you'll be able to take off a little bit into React. I would call that the bare minimum. But if you want to do it the right way, I would highly suggest either taking a course through something like Udemy or through an online session or through the Tech Academy, right? And then going into React afterwards. If you are in a rush, like I was lucky enough to have JavaScript and TypeScript background coming out of the Tech Academy. So understanding why something worked within a React app wasn't my issue. It was just understanding the syntax of React. If that makes sense.
Got it. Thank you. Yes. Um, we do have a few more questions. I know we're kind of out of time. Um, did you want me to go over another one, or should I have everyone direct their questions to you on
No,
LinkedIn? Definitely up to
if
you.
you want to go through one or a couple more, that's fine. That's no problem.
All right. Okay, let's see. Juan is asking, do you have some advice to present projects meaningfully as opposed to just presenting them?
Yeah, so definitely take metrics to heart. When I mentioned metrics, so one of the key things about picking the right type of project is making sure that it's measurable, right? So you want ahead of time to have outlined how will I measure how well this project is doing. Most people, the way that they measure that is, does it work or not? You want to do way more than that to actually catch somebody's eye and maybe impress a sourcer or um, a recruiter inside of an email, or even just when they're looking on your profile. You want to make sure that you are clearly defining the things that you are having an impact on. And these don't need to be world-changing things, but you want to make sure that you're aware that you make decisions as a developer based on the business's needs, and having a good understanding and ability to analytically deduce different different metrics from data. The reason why we create a code base, a front end, a React app in general, is because we have some data and we want to show it to a user. And React is just one way that we can do that. React takes raw data from a database, and we do some stuff. You can choose from a multitude of libraries. You could send it to a client, and if a client is running a React app, it allows you to ingest that a lot easier than you maybe would have to do using raw native JavaScript with HTML. And it gives you more options. There's nothing that React can do that you can't technically do with JavaScript and HTML. However, kind of like the big shining thing about React is it'll probably save you weeks and weeks and months between research and not having you have to be a master JavaScript, front end engineer to do these things. And if you really want to understand how it's doing something, React is an open source library. So you can go into Facebook's mono repo. Facebook has a mono repo with all of their projects. So things like Instagram and React, they're all in the same repo. And you could go in and you could actually pull out React, look at what they did and what it's doing and how it's actually creating HTML and JavaScript. And unless you fully understand all of those things, and I guarantee you won't, no one at Facebook understands all those things. It took an entire, top 5 Fortune 500 companies worth of engineers and years and years and years to build this thing. And that's really what it gives you. It's a very powerful tool, and it allows you to do these things that you otherwise would have to spend so much time and energy into researching and learning yourself. That being said, I do highly suggest you have a good understanding around JavaScript fundamentals. It's super important. You're going to be asked those questions during interviews. Specifically, some interviewers might say use React, use JavaScript. Some might say no, use JavaScript only. So you do want to have those down before digging in and getting into the weeds with those types of things.
Got it. Thanks. Kai is asking, what avenues are there for self-promotion?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to being reached out to by a recruiter or a sourcer, 100% without a doubt, LinkedIn is the most important as far as social networks go. I would suggest you do utilize other social networks as well. What that will do is that will give you possible connections and opportunities that may those people might be on LinkedIn also, but they may just not have come across you. And you're just opening yourself up to a whole new network of individuals and connections. You don't want to just limit yourself to LinkedIn. I would I would highly suggest to go to things like this, right? Because a lot of the times you'll be able to connect with the person talking, and it's sometimes hard. I found it hard to reach out to an engineer when I was a junior dev, like at the Tech Academy, to reach out to a Facebook developer or an Apple developer or a developer at Chase Bank and say, hey, I'd like to connect. I'm a junior dev. Sometimes going to these meetings, you'll kind of get like an auto connection, right? Anyone wants to connect, just reach out. Hey, I was just at. It's a good talking point. I was just at the event that you hosted today. I'd love to connect and learn more about XYZ. So actually going to these events, you'll learn things, but you'll also gain access to really, really cool connections within really cool companies. So I would suggest doing more of these as well. That would be my biggest for reach. Oh,
Great, thank
also,
you.
also one last
Yes,
thing with
as
that.
a reminder.
Yep, don't be afraid to ask questions, right? You need to be vocal and you need to self-promote, right? So if you're ever in an experience where you're thinking to yourself, should I or should I not? I would highly engage, unless you know like it's not a good time for some reason or another. Always go with the should. Like you definitely want to be a little bit more aggressive with your self-promotion than conservative. I think as long as you're humble and you understand where you fit into the grand scheme of things, no one will harp on you for reaching out and trying to build new connections and learn new things.
Great tip, thank you. All right, as a reminder, if you could share that link of the projects you were mentioning,
Yep.
that'd be great. And then also, aside from the project, do you have any resources on where someone could learn TypeScript, JSX, JavaScript,
Yeah. So I did
aside
mention
from like YouTube videos?
those are really well. I am a big proponent of Algo Experts platform. They do more than just technical interviews. They also do front end development work and also front end development interviewing. and they will actually teach you things about front-end development and how to apply practical front-end development processes and ideas. They have Algo Expert, which is like their main product for algorithms and data structures. They have front-end expert. They have system design expert. So they have all these different experts. So I believe it's, I'll type it into chat here. So it's algoexpert.io. And that's the link for all of those things that I utilized when I prepared for my interviews at both Google and Amazon. That helped me out so well. Besides that, I was a huge proponent of Udemy. I waited till on Udemy, like every 2 weeks, classes go from like $100 a class down to like $9. So I would wait until it was one of those weeks where everything was on sale, and I'd buy like 5 or 6 videos. And each video, not videos, but classes. Each class is like maybe like hundreds and hundreds of hours. So I would be careful not to, purchase things that you may never get to, or lesson, languages that you would like to learn. I would focus more on the things that you need to learn to help you get into the career and kind of jumpstart and get your foot in the door. Once you're there, that's when I would, tell you it's good to reach out. But to maximize your time and efficiency, focus on the things that you need to learn to do better in the interviews.
Got it. Thank you. I think those are all the questions in the chat. But again, if you guys have any questions left, I did leave Scott's LinkedIn in the chat. Let me just copy and paste it so it's there for you. So check it out. Thank you so much, Scott, for your awesome presentation. Someone's already asking you to come back for another talk, but I'll reach back out in a couple of months. All right. Oh, also, I forgot to let everyone know that we're recording this. We're going to post it to our YouTube channel later today. And here is a link where you can watch this. As you know, we have these tech talks every Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. We are rescheduling next week's Friday, but I'll keep you posted on that. Look out for my email on Monday. But yeah, thank you so much, Scott, and thank you everyone for joining, and happy Friday.
Thank you for having me. Happy Friday as well.
Thank you, Scott. Bye, guys. Have
Bye.
a good weekend.